Okay, so thank you all for coming. I'd like to start off by saying you all got the email saying that we're going to try to extend this to 90 minutes. I would hope we don't need that because I know your evening is valuable. And if you're even half as tired as I am, you're pretty tired. I had a heck of a day. So I will try to watch the clock and be efficient. I would like to put one item on the agenda that is not currently on the agenda. It's just one of those additions or deletions to agenda. But before I get into that, I just like to open the floor to public comment. Does anybody have any public comment about any items that are not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, the thing that I'd like to ask about on our next scheduled meeting is on the 25th.
In progress.
Oh, sorry. Our next scheduled meeting is on the 25th, which is again a Wednesday. But as it happens, I'm going to be out of town on a business trip on the West Coast. And so even the trip should probably be the day's work should be probably done by 4:30. That's
Road trip.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We can go with you.
Yeah, there you go. So we could spend
No.
ARPA doing a remote meeting, don't you think?
Why not?
Well,
California.
the
Except I
embarrassing
don't want to go in California.
thing is I'm going to Las Vegas. The sad thing is I'm not going to get to have any fun while I'm there because we're going to be trying to compress a lot into 2 days. It's a business meeting. So I would like to ask if people would not mind bumping the meeting of the 25th out 1 week. So I guess that would be, I should have my calendar up.
First.
The first. Okay, so I know that's pushing it actually into the next month. The alternative that would work for me, but I can't speak for the rest of you, is to move it. Well, the 26th, I'm flying home. I don't know if I'll be home by then. But what do people think? Do you want to go ahead and have the meeting on the 25th and just have someone else preside in my absence? Because I'm okay with that too.
I'm okay with the first.
Yeah, I'm okay with the first.
I'd rather not push it that far. I'd rather stay keeping 2 meetings. I mean, we already skipped something in December too. So I think if Jeff wouldn't mind running the meeting, I nominate Jeff.
On the 25th.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. I want to respect people's schedules and I don't like, jumping around too much. So I think it'd be fine with me if we keep that meeting and if Jeff would be so good as to chair things that night.
Sure, why not?
Okay, January 25th.
Okay, Jeff, I'll drop you by some cookies at some point. Okay,
And I love your cookies.
they are good cookies, aren't they? I've eaten too many of them lately. That's part of the problem. Okay, let's move on into the agenda. Our first item on the agenda is to review the minutes of the meeting from December 14th. And those were emailed out with the agenda, but I do not know if everyone had a chance to read them. I hope you did. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, additions or deletions to the minutes from that night?
I'll move the minutes for the December 14th meeting.
I'll second them.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second, but I'd like to, obviously pause and say, does anybody have any additions, corrections, or deletions?
I think they're fine.
Yeah,
I read them. I read them.
Okay. If there's no changes, let's just state your name and your vote.
Mary, yes.
Jeff, yes?
Carrie, yes.
Josh, yes.
Eric, yes.
And Jay, yes. Okay,
Done.
so thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, I always want changes if there are any. It's not necessarily desirable to just always approve them. Let's now move on to the second point on our agenda. The second point on our agenda is discussion with the Transportation Committee. And you should all have gotten a copy in your email of a memo from the Transportation Committee. And it is a couple pages long. I'm going to go ahead and share it, but I know we also have somebody there in the room from the Transportation Committee. Josh, I'm being dense. Who is here from Transportation? Is that Kathleen?
Chris Cole.
Chris Call.
Oh, Chris. Sorry, Chris. I'm looking at the back of your head. So, okay, so let me go ahead.
I'm here too, but Chris is definitely in the building.
No, right. Obviously, Chris's chair should be recognized. Okay, so as everybody knows, we did send a copy of our summary the kind of the spreadsheet where we have things now to both the Recreation Committee and the Transportation Committee, with the idea that it makes very little sense for us to score projects that the Transportation Committee and the Recreation Committee have already put long hours into thinking about. So I'm going to sum this quickly and then I'll shut up. The Richmond Transportation Committee says as their first priority, Bridge Street infrastructure improvements. And as you can see from the agenda, from the memo, that includes a lot. Sidewalks, crosswalks, intersections, bicycle sharrows, and I actually don't remember what that even means, bicycle climbing lane, signage, and this has all been broken out in the link that you see there, the Bridge Street Complete Streets Corridor Study. The second priority, again, quickly summarizing this, is a sidewalk from Jericho Road to on Jericho Road from School Street to Valley View Road. That is a sidewalk that had been proposed but set aside for lack of funding. And then, of course, also we know that there is a very detailed bike, walk, and trails plan that included many, many possibilities. The CCRPC is also conducting a study of Cochrane Road, and that may also suggest some improvements. But with that said, the RTC offers the following. Bike pedestrian lanes, not necessarily in Cochrane Road, trying to pursue funding, and if awarding the funding, we've been turned down once already, we would only be able to complete half the project. The ARPA funding would provide enough funding to complete the entire project. Sidewalks in general, as you know, that was one of our survey suggestions. We kind of combined a bunch. We have two priority sidewalk projects, East Bridge Street and Jericho Road to Valley View. And East Main Street is already slated to get sidewalks. Better access to the park and ride, that was one that you're led up about by many people. The CCRPC is currently doing a study of various means to access the park and ride better, various options. Jeff Ford is on that committee, and I'm sure he could offer something. But of course, the RTC may also have something to say there. A rotary, this again, I'm listing suggestions from our spreadsheet. A rotary is an expensive project based on the backlog at the state level. This is probably not foreseeable in the span of the ARPA money. A four-way stop at Huntington, Cochrane Bridge, Thompson intersection, less expensive than the rotary, but we would have to change the alignment a little bit to make that work. The committee says we don't know if we could do that by the ARPA deadline. We'd have to discuss. And finally, purchase an easement through the FAR and DeGraff land to connect to the Park and Ride and Johnny Brook Road from the village. The committee is not working that proposal, but easements through those properties, which I believe the Gateway Study Group is considering, would make for a meaningful connection to the Park and Ride from the village during non-snow months. So for those of you watching from home who did not have a chance to read this because it was in the packet, but you may not know to look at it, that's kind of where we stand. So Chris, I would like to hush up and let you have the floor to share your thoughts, comments, and suggestions.
Thank you. We had our regular meeting last night, and we talked about our first priority projection. We've already put in a recommendation. We've already put in a grant application that the select board approved for a transportation alternatives program grant. That's 80-20 funding from the state. And as we indicated in the memo, that would pay for an ARPA, that would pay for half of the project. So we put in money for half of the project because that's what the town had for local match. And so we didn't put in for both aspects of the project. So we're doing the project that we applied for is from the railroad intersection to the bridge. And north of or upstream of the railroad is what we did not apply for. So if we were to get the ARPA funding and we were to get the state funding, that would allow us to do the whole project. We could even potentially amend our application. I don't know that we could, but we could at least give the state more information that we had ARPA funding to commit to this project as well, for the whole thing. And the state, like any institution that provides grants, likes to leverage their giving to leverage further giving. And so that may make our TAP grant that we have before the state a little bit more attractive for them. So I can give you whatever information you would like on that. On the Cochrane Road study,
Can we
Can we,
just,
yeah,
Sure.
questions on each as we go?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you would, please.
So Chris, so I'm just trying to understand what the recommendation is. So originally it was for the Bridge Street project from the bridge to the railroad.
and we've applied for that.
Okay,
And that's roughly half the project cost. So what we would like to do is use ARPA money for the second half or use ARPA money for the whole project.
Hold on, stay on the
Second half of what? So,
Stay on the first half, Jeff.
So let me start at the beginning. We have a Bridge Street Complete Streets plan.
Yeah.
It goes from,
yep, I've seen it.
okay, and it goes from Main Street.
Yeah.
All the way down to, I believe,
To the bridge.
Esplanade. I think it might end at,
I thought it ended at
Esplanade.
Esplanade. It doesn't go to the bridge.
No, it
Okay,
doesn't go
that's
to the
where I was
bridge.
confused first. So
Yeah.
it goes railroad to Esplanade on the east side.
correct.
Yeah.
And that's what we have applied for,
Okay, yes.
Transportation Alternatives Program.
That was the 80-20.
Correct.
See
How much money did you ask for the 80-20? Because I know Richmond was putting up, I think you guys bumped it up with the select board and you increased it to like 65,000 is the
I think
20%.
it's like 60,000.
I think
is
it's
the local
60.
match.
It was
Okay,
like,
60?
it was
So
like,
it's like 300,000 about is what we're requesting from the state. So it's around three. I'm saying approximately, I don't,
That's one half of the project.
yes.
Gotcha.
So we would like to either use ARPA funds to complete the project, to do the second half,
And how much is the second half?
approximately the same as the first half.
about another 300,000
I think so.
there, but
I'll get you, I will follow up with the numbers.
Okay, that would be very important for us.
And then the second piece, the second option, not the second piece, is if you wanted to fund the whole project with ARPA funds. We would welcome that.
Nah,
We'd like to, I think, wait for the state to say yes or no before we commit to that.
Yeah.
So, we're not going to say yes or no tonight. So, we're just trying to get information on it. And what we have yet to work out is criteria of how we select projects. But one criteria that we have discussed is leveraging the ARPA money with other dollars. So the Bridge Street, the first leg of that going up to the railroad fits that, at least that criteria of leveraging money.
Right.
So that's as far as we've gotten.
So if I can just make sure I understand, we are in no means committing to this amount, but the first half of the project, if the state comes through, you're looking for about 65,000. And if we were to do the whole project and the state did come through, to be looking at a total of approximately 365. Is that correct?
No.
Okay,
mean,
Go
For the project, you're talking about what we applied for?
yeah.
Yes,
Yes, that is correct, for what we applied for.
It's 60,000, okay?
And so then the second half of the project, you said would be another 300,000.
Approximately, plus local
So
match.
the total ask.
Jay, I prefer to get you that number than.
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So any other questions about the first proposal?
So my recollection, Chris, is that the total project cost was 300,000. And the 80-20 split was 240 for the state and 60 for the town. So that the 20% match, that's my recollection of what was presented to us, right?
those numbers, right?
Yeah, so
50,000
is 20%, is 20%.
300,
So I think I think that's what was
reasonable number.
put in for the TAP grant was that's what I recall from Revy.
The total project is around 360 something.
Oh.
Of which 60,000 is from the town and 300 is from,
Wow, that's what it is.
So that's different than I think what was presented to us.
I don't know. And I
Okay.
really would like to get.
So
the
that would be
numbers.
worth.
So
trying-
yeah, he can get us the numbers, but I think we can let up on that one. Pursuant to the numbers coming through. So thank you, Chris, on that one.
So
The
I have
next-
another question on the second leg, going from Railroad Street up to Main Street. From the scoping study, we do have estimates of costs, as I recall. So we have at least ballpark estimates of what the costs would be. Does the Transportation Committee planning on applying for a TAP grant for that?
Well, after we get the first one. And
So
then
you-
it'll
and
be a
you can-
number, it'll be a number of years before we're eligible for another one. They look at grants awarded to towns from the same program, and if you get a grant, it will be a number of years before you get another.
And that would knock us out of the window for ARPA money as we understand it.
If we wanted to use ARPA money for matching, Chris said, you know, we'd love to have you pay for the whole thing. I don't think we'd probably do that, but if we did want to, and we were going to pay for the whole second half, then we wouldn't have to wait years for the state to say, can you or can't you?
That's fine, but you know, if it knocks it off the table for the ARPA money, if you were planning to apply for a grant, because you would not be able to do that. So the way that I understand the ARPA money is that we need to commit the dollars by the end of 2024 and spend them by the end of 2026, which is relevant for a lot of your projects here.
Right.
So that project is scoped from one end to the other.
Yeah.
With pretty good estimates. We would have to get those estimates redone,
Okay.
obviously.
Okay,
Can I ask another question, Jay?
Sure.
Oh, so, you might not know the answer to this. The TAP money, is that any of the ARPA money that the state actually received? Because the state hasn't determined where they're spending all of their ARPA money yet either. Are there any possible transportation, pedestrian, bicycle, recreational funds that the state ARPA has that we can match that with anything?
I don't know what the state's plans are for their ARPA
Just thinking
funding,
like,
but the TAP funding comes, is US DOT, United States Department of Transportation funding. And every state is required to set some of their funding aside and spend it on this program. So that's what it
Okay.
is.
I don't know if any of you looked into that at all, and it may be something that if you guys wouldn't mind looking into the state's ARPA money, and if it's been, any of it's sitting there for purposes like this. I'm just asking
Okay, I can,
if you guys can have somebody do a little research on that too, because maybe we could really put our ARPA money against the state's ARPA money and get some things done for transportation,
I think that's a good point. Thank you.
especially around the pedestrian and the bicycle stuff.
Okay, ready to move on to the next one?
sure.
I guess we are.
So Jericho Road, from School Street to Valley View Road sidewalk.
I have a question just about that little stretch. How many people does this serve? To have a sidewalk, just to say we've got a sidewalk is interesting, but how many people do you expect it's going to serve?
It'll serve the folks living in Valley View and those serving, what's the street?
Southview.
Those two
Do
sides
you have
of
a
the
quantity?
street.
She's just asking for a number. Do you know number of residents in that area?
No,
5?
Okay.
I don't think that's reasonable.
Southview has, it's gotta have, what, 100 units? Well, it also would be
Just like,
Hidden Pines too, you know, so Hidden Pines connects with Southview.
so
So you-
just the quantity, if you can at some point get us that number, that would be really helpful.
So I think it would be not just Valley View and Southview, but Hidden Pines. I could
Yes,
envision a kid riding a bike
connect, yes.
to connect through and getting to the school. This idea has been around for quite some time, and the barrier has been, getting many barriers, but one of them is getting it underneath the interstate. And that's the expensive part of the project, I would imagine.
this project
Right.
has less engineering involved than the first project.
So it might take a while to do all of that engineering.
Yeah, and costs. There would need to be some engineering, because if you think about the slopes leading up to Valley View
Yeah,
on that side of the road, I question,
Do you guys have a preliminary estimate on the first time when you looked at that? Because I think I was at a select board meeting where they talked with capital plan that it was originally estimated at 500,000 and it could go up to as high as $1 million
Yeah.
when it was finally done. Is that
you're right.
any factual numbers that came from you guys, or was that just numbers that were kicking around?
I don't know. I
Okay.
can't.
Because they talked about it when they were discussing their capital plan. So if you guys can come back to us with,
I'll get you the
if
number.
you think
I'll
that's
get you the number from the
Well,
estimate,
wait.
but there's engineering that needs to be
Right.
done with this one that doesn't need to be done
with the first one.
with the first one.
If you guys really think that option number 2 isn't going to have engineering numbers or isn't going to be
It can meet the
in the
deadline.
shoot for the deadline.
It can
to
meet the
have the-
deadlines. I just can't give you a hard number, I think, financially, because I
Okay.
do think the amount of work that's been done can give you an estimate, but it's not going to be the same. And
Okay.
as I mentioned, Alan Knowles and I are both concerned about the slopes.
Yep.
And the stabilization that would be required to
Uh-huh.
extend the sidewalk. And so,
Right.
Another
I would like to
barrier-
add one, I'd like to add one little thing, which is not a number. It's just a lot of people say, why would we even do that? One anecdotal thing is that if a child takes the bus and does not walk, let's say you have a child living literally in Southview and their mother or father doesn't feel it's safe for them to walk to school, even though it might be, I don't know, 3/10 of a mile. If they get on the bus, it takes apparently an hour on the current route to drive all the way around and finally get that kid to school. Now, again, that's just anecdotal. I don't have a child. I haven't tried doing that, but that's one of the drivers, the getting to school safely issue without it taking all day to do it.
Yeah, but it might be cheaper to have a van.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just talk to the school and say, could we send the bus the other direction?
Chris, do you know Aaron Little?
yeah,
So he's the transportation director for MMU.
okay.
Very competent transportation director, best we've had in my mind. He's really worth talking to. And
I know Aaron very well.
yeah, he said he knew you. So that he would be worth talking to about scheduling. I think Jay brings up a good point. It's definitely problematic to put a kid on an hour on a bus for an hour anywhere. But when you're within sight distance of the school and you still have to be on the bus for an hour is problematic. The other issue that I understood about that one is that it's unlikely to be eligible for grant money because of connectivity. I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Well, the state has a program that's safe routes to schools.
Yeah.
Where it used to have actually money behind it.
Yeah.
Where they would provide funding to communities to build sidewalks to schools where kids did not have a safe way to schools. Since the funding went away, they still keep it as an item when you're applying for bike ped grants. Does the
Mhm.
sidewalk go to a school? So you get extra points for that.
Okay,
There
so
is a rationale for building sidewalks to schools.
yeah, it would seem like it, but I think it was Revy who told us that.
I think it was right.
I think it was Revy who told us, says, oh, wait, that won't be eligible. I mean, he was pretty definitive about it, which surprised me.
About for what?
But the Southview, that the sidewalk that would go up there because it didn't connect to another town, is my understanding, or another walk path or something.
That would be surprising to me because you're building a sidewalk from a residential neighborhood
Agreed.
where kids live to a school.
There was something,
think it was something
there was
else.
something about that was found strange. And the time it would take to figure all of that out might knock it off the table for ARPA money. You know, engineering and grant money. We're already late for getting applying for transportation grant money. It
Yeah,
takes so
we're
much time.
we're not going to apply for this one until we get the first project. So,
Yeah.
we've done some planning as a transportation committee.
Yeah.
And we've got projects scoped and ready to go. And we're not going to continue to do planning and have a bunch of projects on the shelf and have all that planning money go to waste, because then all your estimates.
Yeah, exactly. So
So we're gonna stick with number one and keep plugging away at that one, and number two, will sit where it sits until we take care of number one.
And so you should know, Kara's correct, that this specific project came up under capital planning. It was, the plan was to do this in 2036.
Mhm.
That it was gonna, if it cost $500,000 today, it would cost $1 million then. And in order to have this is what we were told. And it's unlikely that we would get grant funding for that. So we would have to pay for it ourselves. And in order to pay for it ourselves, we should be putting significant money aside in our capital reserve, $80,000 a year or something like that. Now, to plan for a project in 2036 that may or
Right.
may not. Right? Which is that your recollection, Jay?
Yeah. And I would like to see a sidewalk there as much as anybody, but I do think that when you put everything together, unless an angel comes along, it's you can't make the finances work. But that's just my 2 cents. I'd love to see whatever numbers we can get. If Chris, at some point, I know Chris has said, the engineering would take a while. We can't just snap our fingers and build tomorrow with the slopes, but it's fun to think about.
So that's kind of the background and the history that we're dealing with as far and there. I can't remember. I think we took it out. I think
Yeah,
we took
They took it out of the capital.
we
plan.
took it
They're
out of
not
the
ready to-
the $80,000 this year of putting into that with the tacit agreement that if we're going to spend $1 million on a sidewalk sometime, anytime, that before we start putting money away, we should probably ask voters, to have a vote in some fashion, rather than try to build up a reserve fund to
Save
work
money
towards it.
during high inflation when you don't know if that's what the voters.
So that, I thought, it's not necessarily relevant for this discussion, but I thought it's relevant for the transportation committee to understand how that went down at the select board level.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so any other questions about the second item that Chris talked to us about? Okay, then if you want to keep going, Chris, thank you.
I think this third item, really the only thing of interest on the third item is the projects that come out of the planning, and I'm not sure that it lines up well with the ARPA. The town is going to do some short-term that town manager can speak better to than Josh can speak better about than I can. What the transportation committee is doing is working with the CCRPC on it's a corridor. It's being labeled a corridor plan, but it's going to have scoping, which is more in-depth information that can, inform you about what your construction costs are going to be in the 2 residential sections of Cochrane Road on either end, the village and the Jonesville section. And so those where the speed limit is 25 miles an hour will be scoped. And that includes some level of information that, as I mentioned, leads to construction estimates. The centerpiece of it will not undergo scoping, and we'll just look for alternatives for safe bicycle and pedestrian passage through that area.
Is the CCRPC, is it matching funding that the town has to come up with for those scoping? And do we have that dollar amount of how much that is?
Yep.
And is that all of it already scheduled in the 2024 budget?
Correct.
Okay, so
The planning.
you're not asking for us to
No,
put
all I'm-
ARPA money toward any of that. You're just
No.
giving us a heads up.
I'm giving you a heads up that from
Great.
that second planning
Oh.
project, which will be done in June of 24, the corridor study piece will be done in June of 24,
It'll
right?
be done a little later. So the first part, it'll be, June 24th or 23rd. Yes, it'll be done by June, if not a little earlier. 24th.
Right,
Yes.
of 24.
Yes.
And there may be projects that come out of that the town would want to spend the ARPA money on. I just don't know what those projects would be, and I don't, that's up to you guys whether you want to roll that dice and how you're going to fund those.
But that would
projects.
be in the 25 budget, because it start in July of 24, would go into a
State
25
fiscal year
budget. So
25.
the town might, I don't know if they have it, they might not have the information in time to put it in a budget. Because
It
if
would-
the information doesn't come till June, you guys do your budgets in by March for town meeting approval,
By January.
right?
So you talk about scoping for either end of Cochrane Road,
Yeah,
but
to do the
scoping
work.
what?
Scoping potential traffic calming improvements. So infrastructure of some type, whether
It could be sidewalks, it
it could be sidewalks, it could be raised pedestrian crossings with, lights at trailheads. It could be a variety of things, because it's a transportation corridor, but it's a pretty heavily used recreation
Yeah,
corridor.
definitely.
Right.
And so that's really, and I don't
Yeah,
know.
but
what
we have
those-
no idea what.
We have no idea what they be. We haven't done the planning study yet.
So that's probably not going to be within the timeframe for
It
ARPA.
could be done in
anyways.
end of 24, and then you have fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26.
See, it's likely, our committee's not going to go that long.
Yeah, I mean,
I
really hope not.
refuse to go that long.
As I understand it, though, I mean, yeah, the timelines are pretty, clear cut, but are there strict guidelines as to what the money can be spent for? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, could we just say, transportation related recreational paths or
No,
safety?
No,
You do need to be fairly specific about the project.
no, you have to be specific
No.
about the
Yeah.
projects. But we could pay for the scoping work that they're doing
Yeah.
with town money, and the town could put away the budgeted scoping money,
Right.
and that would take care of that problem.
Yeah, I mean, right.
Get it?
Are you looking, are you looking for money for the scoping project? You're like, I mean, of course you're looking. for
listen,
money.
we're agnostic where the money comes from, as
Yeah.
long as we have a local match.
Yeah.
If the town decides it would rather save its town money and spend ARPA money. than
But I
make the
think we're
local match.
better, I think we're better.
But we would have to check with the CCRPC as to whether or not federal funds can match federal funds, because typically
can't.
they
They-
cannot.
I know, but ARPA can.
Okay.
So.
So if you can,
We've gotten
yeah, you can do
clarification.
But
of
if
that.
ARPA can, we don't want to offset the other side. If the other side says you can't use federal funds, then it can't.
We could just,
It's been
can we just,
told that by the VLCT that we can use ARPA money for
Yeah.
that.
Let's make sure we do it in writing.
I mean, can we just,
I do.
Kara's right, though. If the other grant says you can't use federal funds as your match,
Specifically says you cannot.
like, we're allowed to use ARPA as a match as long as the grant that we're matching it with says you can use federal funds for that match.
That
Right?
wasn't my understanding from Katie Buckley,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
If you don't have
So,
it in writing, you can't trust it.
so just so you know our timeline, so that, this committee is probably not going to go,
Probably done by select
please
board.
not by not 6 months. We're trying to be done by town meeting. And it's likely that the ARPA money will be committed sometime this year, something like that. So like, we have not gotten to the point where we said, well, we should hold back X number of dollars for another year for, until we have enough information we haven't talked about doing that at all.
It sounds like you could spend almost a lot of it in your first project. So I don't know. We have to worry about 3 years from now.
Right.
I mean, it does take a lot to get construction projects
Yeah.
done. And so if you're
Right.
thinking about spending money on construction, I would
Has to be done.
I would
Yeah.
make your decision sooner rather than later.
Right,
Yes.
exactly right.
Yes.
Right. We do know
Okay.
that to save money, we talked about Jeff Ford driving the backhoe. So, maybe there's some savings
You
there.
really don't want me doing that.
Yay.
Okay, so everybody, you've heard the three main bullet points in Chris's list, and as Kara just said, the money for the first project, especially if it should happen that we do try to pay for the second half, that is going to eat up some of the money. The sidewalk numbers, we're looking to get back how many people really would be possibly using it. And then the scoping studies that affect, access to the park and ride, scoping studies along Cochrane Road. Those may not be really done in time to have shovels in the ground. Anybody want to kind of add anything else to that summation?
No, my conclusion in looking at this is that really the only project that fits within our timeline is the Bridge Street project. And the other ones are interesting. I'm not saying that they're not interesting projects. But as far as ARPA funding, it seems like those are the only ones that fit within our, what we have been talking about anyways, as far as timeline.
Okay. So Chris, anything else you'd like to share? Everybody, anything else you'd like to ask Chris?
I have another question, if it's okay, Chris.
Mhm.
The upper section of the sidewalk that we're looking at, the number one
Yep.
item here, the upper section of the sidewalk, is that going to, I apologize, I did not look at the full plans and stuff like that.
It's okay.
Does that eliminate any parking spaces or cause any issues with parking in that area that also has to look at further? Because the select board is already dealing with issues of parking in the village on Route 2, West Main Street and stuff like that. Is there any parking issues any loss of parking spaces with those
I don't think
sidewalks?
so. They're
Any
all on each
gain of
side.
parking spaces with those sidewalks? Like,
No.
can we? No, I'm just
Yeah,
putting it
no,
out there
I don't
because
think there's
maybe it
any-
helps solve another problem.
I don't think there's any loss or gain of parking spaces. Kathleen, any loss or gain? I can't
No,
recall.
not on the east side of the
No.
Bridge Street project, no.
Great, good to know. I mean, if we gain something, it would be another
nice.
reason to have a criteria that helps solve another issue.
And,
Okay,
and Sharrows, to answer your earlier question, Jay, it's just a fancy name for paint on the pavement.
Oh,
Has a bicycle and an arrow,
So we like
so
that.
it's a Sharrow.
got
That
it.
could be-
A shared arrow.
It's a
Share the
name.
road. It's a share the road arrow, which gets shortened to Sharrow.
Oh,
Paste, increase your word power. Everybody try to fit that word into some conversation the following day.
I shall never use it.
Okay, well, Chris, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate the work that the Transportation Committee has put in. I saw Kathleen's email about the meeting last night, and unfortunately, what was being here in Buffalo, I couldn't even get there via Zoom, but I'm really, really grateful for all the work the Transportation Committee has put in over the years and their latest stuff. So thank you again.
Yeah, I would echo that. You guys are really helping us a great deal with issues that have been around for a very long time.
Thank you. It's definitely a lot of work working through the federal process.
Really?
But we do enjoy it and
Never heard of anybody say that.
helping the town. We will enjoy it a lot more when we are successful getting a grant from the state though.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next item on our agenda. We have representatives of the Recreation Committee here. And as I did earlier with the Transportation Committee's discussions, I'd like to just pop the memo from the Rec Committee up. So
excuse me,
as you can see,
Dave, before you go, could you just introduce who's here from Recreation like you did with who was here
Oh,
from?
please do. Yes. For those of you who are here from Recreation, if you could introduce yourself so we can get your names in the minutes.
Sure, I'm Kate Kreider, I'm co-chair of the Recreation Committee.
And I'm Sherry Lynn, the other co-chair.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
How many people are on the Recreation Committee?
We have 5, and we are always looking for more committee members. We do have a rep that I think is going to the select board next meeting to be reviewed for approval as a member from Bolton. It's a 3-town rec committee with a majority of Richmond residents. I'm in Huntington, actually, and then this would be a Bolton representative.
Okay,
So how many Richmond residents on your, out of your 5?
Mark Basil, Harlan Stockwell, Kirsten Santor, and Kate
Yeah.
Kreidler.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if anybody knows people who have a good bit of spare time and bouncy, excited personalities, let us know. It sounds like the Rec Committee would not turn away a few more people. Okay, so let me quickly pop up, because again, we're not here to hear me talk, but I want to, for the sake of the people who are not on the committee but might be watching this later via Zoom, and maybe didn't have the chance to look at the packet. This document, it's a 2-page memo. The same thing that happened with the Transportation Committee happened with the Rec Committee. We sent them a link to our master list of suggestions from the townspeople. And this is kind of I'm very grateful for the price breakdown. Remember, we have $1.2 million to spend before 2026 and to commit by 2024. And it's very helpful to have numbers like this. So as they said here at the top, we have identified the following items for which we have been focused on finding funds on Volunteers Green. And there are many, many suggestions relating to Volunteers Green. Tables, 10K. Benches, if they're recycled plastic, and I'd like to hear more about the convertible option, 5K. A playground, I don't know if that's a net new playground or just significant expansion of the existing one. I'd like to hear more about that. Better signage, parking lot directions and barriers. We know that paving is scheduled to happen in spring of 2023. Large green sign replacement, $8,000. Trash and recycling receptacles, $5,000. That would be at the band shell, the boat launch, the playground, the far fields. Mats, groundwork installation, $5,000. Band shell repairs, I can definitely agree those need to be done. add more power so the farmers market vendors can use that, work on the foundation. Landscaping around the band shell, it's currently in very poor shape. Additional restroom options, not very expensive. We might want to hear more about that. And then the thing that I know you were all super interested in is the Gaga ball pit.
Yeah.
And Jeff has told it, I had never heard of this, but Jeff says they've got one up at the school and he goes up there like every day to watch. So, so altogether, if these numbers are true and we just said, sure, we'll pay for all this, this would still leave us almost $1 million in the ARPA funds. But I'm just speaking out of turn, but it sounds like a lot of this would have significant lifestyle improvement impacts on our town. But that's just my 2 cents. What I'd like to do now is hush up and let our 2 representatives from the rec committee kind of go through those and share more thoughts or answer questions about them.
Sure. You want me to go first, Sherry?
Sure.
All right. Thank you for summing that up. And we appreciate all of the ARPA committee's work to compile all of the great data from the townspeople too, and everything that they want. There are a lot of great ideas in there. I know some stuff at Volunteers Green was touched on. There's some other items we liked, but we knew they would have some ongoing cost and maintenance related, which is not ideal. But so for the past year, and it's probably been 1.5 years that we've really been focusing on Volunteers Green. We did try to get a VORAC grant in 2021 and got turned down.
What is VORAC?
Do you remember what it stands for, Sherry?
I had to look it up. Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative through the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. So that's it. What was that?
Did you apply for one and didn't get it when?
Yeah, 2021.
It was the fall, I think, that we applied, right? Like November, December, Sherry?
I think that might be correct. Yeah. I had just started actually.
What were you looking to do with that grant?
All this work that's on the
All of
list.
this.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Except for we didn't have the Gaga pit and the restrooms on there, but everything above that we did.
Okay. And like Jay asked, is the playground an expansion or a replacement?
Replacement.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not the safest.
Can this equipment still be used though? It's being used by children now.
Yeah.
I'm saying I wouldn't mind having a bigger playground because we've got so many more younger children coming that could we keep this one and do another one?
Yeah, well, what we talked about at our last meeting is we are trying to be looking at the capital plan as an option for enhancements or add on to the playground, but we thought we should, again with the VORAC grant, it was the idea of taking the space that is the playground and replacing it with a structure that is easily accessible, natural elements, low environmental impact, and those types of things. Because it is old, I can't remember what year it was installed. So
I think Harlan said it was the early 80s time.
Yeah.
I think it's about 40 years old. And he said every year there's stuff that needs to be repaired on it. And it's just kind of patchwork. And at some point it's just not going to be safe to use anymore.
Right.
And also, as we've all seen, it's often very, very crowded down there.
Yes.
I think we need to research that, okay? Because I don't think it was the 80s. I swear it's been there since my children. And
Oh, wow.
Thank you very much.
Maybe the playground was established 40 years ago.
Yes.
That specific area, but that
is-
equipment ain't that old.
No, that equipment has
Yeah.
been replaced since the original.
I could be wrong. It was just a guess. I don't know. Have an actual number
Phew.
for you. Sorry.
Okay, just curious what the plan was. So right now that playground is a replacement, not an expansion.
Mhm.
Correct. Yep. But if you so desire to have an expansion, but we were, yeah, I mean, that is something we didn't put into this, but as we were talking, we were thinking, okay, what about the capital plan? Is there an opportunity to do an expansion through that? So we're still trying to, I mean, the nice thing about the ARPA funding, I like your timeline because really, we have the ideas in place, and it would really mean that we get some of the vendors to present some ideas for what the playground would look like and have the public look at the options. So we could go very quickly.
On a side note, and I'll bring it up to you guys later, I have a UVM graduate, a student that's graduating next May who's offered to do a design for the park for you. So I will get that person in touch with you.
Playground design or design for the
A full park design for you. That's
Wow.
what they're going to school for, and they've just designed one for somebody else, and they
including
said,
all the ball fields and everything. Wow.
That would be
so
amazing.
just a heads up, I'll send that person your way. I would love to anyhow. So aside from that, can I ask you a couple other questions? I don't mean to monopolize everybody, the recreation.
No, go right ahead, Kara.
I'm very, very excited about the recreational side of things. Do you currently have trash receptacles now that just need to be replaced?
Well, I think the issue is during certain times of the year, we need more receptacles.
Okay,
Because, yeah,
high
because,
traffic summer.
yeah, it got a little crazy.
And so who empties I want to make sure that when we look at something, we don't burden another department that we're unaware of burdening. Does the highway department empty those? Does the recreational committee empty the trash?
We don't know.
Highway does?
Yeah.
Okay, that's something that, okay, I want to just connect those dots. So that's why I asked that question.
I thought they just set them on fire.
Do you also manage, and I don't know if it's the right word is manage, do you also oversee the Browns Court Park?
Well, now, so we do talk about Browns Court. We did recently, we had a little bit of funding to purchase a bench to possibly put in Browns Court. So yes, that is an area that we have talked about, but not as much as Volunteers Green and the playground in the past year and a half.
But it is under you guys too.
Yeah. Okay, add anything else?
Now, are the picnic tables that you're looking at and stuff like that, is that something that gets left out for all seasons, or is it something that then gets taken up and stored? What's the plan for, like, and the benches? Because I know there's a lot of benches around town that need maintenance, period. Like there's one outside here that looks terrible. I think there's some over at the Round Church Park that need to be looked at. Is that something that you guys are looking at as well, and you're including those, or are you just including benches for the Volunteers Green?
This was for Volunteers Green. I don't believe, okay, we weren't thinking about the other spots that I'm aware of, right?
No, I believe it's just for Volunteers Green to
Yeah.
replace what's there. And as far as I know, the plan is to leave them there, just like the
Yeah.
current benches and tables.
Can I just jump in there? I think that the town center budget is responsible for replacing that POS out here. And it's been there long enough so that it needs replacing. And I think the one at the Round Church was replaced when somebody bought a bench over there and the bike stand. So that's within the last number of years. But I do believe that's probably a project that is not in the recreation area, just, you know, from how I see things.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we weren't not thinking about other areas that you guys might have included in your numbers. I just wanted to make sure. So I appreciate all your hard work on this. I'm
Oh, that's
very
nice.
excited about it. Can I
Right.
ask why you didn't, I keep getting bugged by some people to have you put a basketball court in that's lit, that can be flooded in the winter to be the skating rink. Is that something that you guys considered at all in your planning? And I think the cost associated with that is a little research done at about 35,000.
I wasn't aware of that, although I do know that they usually do a skating rink already at Volunteers Green in the wintertime. But no, I hadn't heard of that. And
Okay,
I'm not
'cause
sure what the rules would be for putting that in. I know in the past, Ravi, I believe, had mentioned that there are restrictions on putting in structures at Volunteers
Yep.
Green because
Yeah.
it's a floodplain.
Pervious pavement.
It can be done.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious, because I know it was on the
Okay.
list and people are asking me that one. The other one that we've been posed the question a lot about was the potential for, and this is, people have actually said to me where they thought these should go, was pickleball courts at Brown's Court, because that's an older generation usually playing that more, so they're more respectful in the neighborhood. That kind of thing. And I just didn't know if you guys considered that for Brown's Court at all, because I'm trying to look at all age groups, from the little children on the playground to the seniors in our community, and seeing other recreational options for them. Is that something that you guys talked about at all?
Not pickleball. I think it was 2 years ago, Kate, we had a survey, and I think there were like 300 and some odd residents of Richmond that filled it out, and so many residents from Bolton and Huntington. And that survey did provide, people opportunities to weigh in on areas that they would like to see. From that survey, we honed in on Volunteers Green. So it's not that maybe it was mentioned in that survey, but it wasn't one of the things that we focused on for the last, 18 months to 2 years.
Right. In addition to
Good to know.
pickleball, one of the most common suggestions actually on the spreadsheet was tennis courts. And tennis courts have a big problem, which is, turns out they have to be maintained. And we don't have, unless we charge for use of them, I don't know how we do that. That would be one of the biggest reasons not to have them. But on the other hand, many people who contacted me about tennis courts say every other town around here has them. Why don't we? I don't play tennis, but if it were possible to get a couple courts or 3 courts up at Brown's Court that could be used either as tennis or pickleball. And I know there's some people who think tennis and pickleball can coexist on the same courts, just take turns. Other people say no, the two are going to go each other like rats in a sack. Tennis people hate pickleball people and vice versa. I don't know any of that. But I do know that that's something I've heard about so many times. Why can't we get some tennis courts in?
Yeah, so let me just interject one thing. The process that we did at the meeting earlier this month was we looked at the list and aligned it with what our work plan has been and priorities have been for the last 2 years. So I think, as Kate said, even though there were a lot of great things listed on your survey that people provided, we just literally picked the items that matched up that we're already interested in.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that, because you did say that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's great. I mean, I love basketball. I've never played pickleball, but that is not one of the areas we're focused on right now.
Okay, so if we wanted to pursue a basketball court, that could be also a hockey ring.
Yeah.
And also pursue tennis and pickleball, we would have to research that more on our own. And the Recreation Committee could certainly pitch in if we really wanted to pursue that. But as you said, you looked at things you're already working on, and that was obviously, except for the playground itself, a lot of this is relatively small stuff, but that I think people would appreciate having.
Yeah, and I
Hey,
kind of
could I
felt like,
ask a process question?
sorry. Yeah.
So, as far as the Recreation Committee, do you have an annual budget?
No,
500.
it's nothing.
Don't we, Sherry? That's what we used for the bench. I think. we
Yeah,
get
it's
500 a year.
not much. Yeah.
Have you thought of it? I mean, a lot of what is on your list here are, what I would consider consumables.
Yeah.
Things that
yeah.
will be used up.
Mhm.
And this is one-time money that we'll never see again.
Mhm.
So it's hard to call a lot of these things investments. They're more,
I think.
Well, we have been in discussion about.
right, so
It's
that,
fine.
so, $1,000 for landscaping, you're gonna use that up pretty quick. And
Band shell repairs.
yeah, but I mean, you're right, you're right. That certainly the big ticket item is the playground, and that was on the list. That was, did talk about that.
Yeah.
But a lot of these other things are things that are likely to come and go.
Yeah, but I like
Yeah.
that. I just want to let you know, as an ARPA committee member, I really like that some of this stuff is beautification, because I think that says a lot for where our dollar went. Is it can't just be on one singular project that only certain people benefit from, whereas if we can sprinkle a little bit of money that makes a new sign and things look fresh and new and welcoming,
Mhm.
I think that goes a long, long way. So I really appreciate the little breakdown of this kind of stuff. And that moving forward, if any one of these things is taken care of with ARPA money, then you know that you can plan it into a capital plan that, you know, the sign
Yeah.
needs to be replaced in 20 years because it
Yeah.
hasn't been
Right.
done in 20 years. I
Right.
mean, it
Yeah.
allows you to start planning a capital plan
Yep.
and getting an annual budget from the select
Yeah.
board, but it gives you a base point to start with some new, clean, fresh things. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was, we've been in discussion about possible, reaching out for more of a budget or capital plan. The thing is, the recreation committee is relatively new, that like it's been revived only for 2 or 3 years. So
Yeah.
we're kind of still figuring out what we're doing and getting our footing. But we are definitely having discussions regarding how we can have some ongoing funding from the town to help.
Yeah, I think that is very important information, for, way back, there was a rec committee, then the rec committee stopped, and then it was around just before COVID, the rec committee got started up again, so. So I think that's why maybe there's no budget item, around it, so. I love that idea of being able to, because we are thinking about long-term sustainability, what could be going into a capital plan if we were able to get this done? And then
But you-
just a regular budget item, like to
But you-
do some of the stuff.
I'm going to be clear, you have to be realizing that your recreation committee is made up of Huntington, Bolton, and Richmond, so
Yeah.
Richmond taxpayer, I'm just going to say, yeah, we might want to make sure we got a couple other towns if they want to do something too.
Right. So I'd just like to jump in. I want to thank everybody for the comments. One of the key things that the money was actually specified to do is do things that will increase the health of our townspeople. And by doing anything that gives people better opportunities to make use of volunteers green, signage, better marking of trails, improving the area around the farmers market. All of these are potentially boost to people's ability to get exercise. It also, beautification, I think, is also a completely legitimate use for this money. When I look at this list, I don't see a single thing on here. I'm not Mr. Profligate, but I don't see a single thing on here that I wouldn't want. And there's some things I would very, very much want. My wife is in the Richmond Community Band, and the band shell is frankly in terrible shape. And the farmers market area, we know how popular the farmers market is. If we had twice the size there, we could probably still have that place completely full every Friday. And when you look at the cost of these things, if you set aside the playground, this doesn't even, this would come to $49,000 apparently out of 1.2 million. I think all this is a very worthy expenditure, but again, I'm only one person. I would like us, since the rec committee hasn't done it, which is no fault of theirs, they've been setting their sights on what is reasonable, and they're not been off from the wild blue yonder. If it were possible to get a price for a convertible basketball court / hockey rink, just because the recreation committee hasn't explored that doesn't mean we can't. I don't know how long it would take to build one, but we should, if we want to consider that, we need to get that going very quickly to find out what that involves. One thing that frankly, very few suggestions came in about, but again, getting back to that whole question of exercise and health and well-being, if you've been down to the Burlington waterfront and you've gone north on the rec path, you know that along the rec path, periodically there are fitness stations where you can stop and do various exercises. The fitness equipment obviously costs money, and it obviously has to be maintained. But I wonder if that's ever been something that the rec committee has thought about, maybe running along the river there, along the Volunteers Green Trail that goes, along the riverbank and back around. If you put a chin-up station here and a you know what I'm talking about. Have you guys ever looked into, you know, a rec / fitness trail there at Volunteers Green?
We had a presentation, but it wasn't, it was more about a stationary fitness center. We had, I can't remember who, there was some grant opportunity. So your idea of kind of a par court or run, I think is what it used to be called, where you go to the different stations. We haven't heard about that. This was more of a stationary
Okay,
project, and there was grant funding for that. We chose not to move forward at that point. I did see that, I think someone listed fitness center or something.
yeah,
Did
there are
you
a
have
couple,
that on the list? But no, we haven't actually tried to talk about with the trails, you know, whether or not, you know, something could be put there for chin-ups, as you said, or sit-ups
Right.
or bench lifts and things like that.
yeah, and you know, a stationary fitness area, I think, would also work. I've been in towns where they clearly see a lot of use. I've been in towns, since I travel a lot and I do a lot of walking outdoors, I've seen towns where clearly no one's using them. But
Yeah.
you know, as you all know, Vermont is the healthiest state in the nation with the highest percentage of people who do go out and get regular outdoor exercise. I think we would probably be more likely to use it than, say, somebody in, I don't know, Tennessee. One other thing that I wanted to ask about, because a couple comments came up about building structures in Volunteers Green.
Yeah.
One thing that I've been asked about again by just people stopping in the marketplace is, why don't we have a picnic pavilion that you could, you know, once in a while rent out for events, but that otherwise, you know, would be a covered place to get out of the sun and have a few picnic tables in there. I imagine those are not cheap and they would also have to be maintained. But is it even legal to put up such a thing on Volunteers Green?
Yes.
We talked about, oh, it is, okay.
Flow through.
Yes, it's a flow through. It can flow through. It's definitely allowed, especially since you're allowed to put bathrooms in the floodplain. I'm pretty sure I'm guarantee you that you can put a pavilion. But my question out there, Jay, about the pavilion side of things goes back to the band shelter. And I think when the band shelter was originally designed, it wasn't designed at the right angle for, like, you could have had people all the way down the hill if you had turned it around and faced the other way
I've always been curious.
instead of facing the road. So since the band shelter needs work, you might have the opportunity to take the slab of where the band shelter is and turn it into more of a pavilion style situation. So since people have come to me and thrown numbers out with basketball courts and stuff like that, I'll get those people in touch with you guys, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And the same people who talked about a pavilion, Jay, to me, who had numbers and thought it was a reasonable thing, I will make them contact the recreation committee, because people think I make up people. And have them contact you along with that student that spoke to me about doing a plan for you.
Right.
So maybe the whole plan could come together in a short period of time with some of your dreams, some of the things we've talked about,
Love the idea of a plan.
and
great.
coming together with potentially where a pavilion could go and what would be the best use of that, and
Right.
potentially looking at Browns Court for some pickleball courts. So if you all don't mind, if we
Okay.
table your wish list and come back with actual more numbers on some other areas and firm up things. If you all don't mind, on my side of things, because your 200,000 was real reasonable, because when I looked up the cost of accessible play structures for the accessibility, for the inclusion of other, you know, children who might not have the capabilities to be on this one. 150, so 200,000 was very reasonable, was very within that reason. But could you also look into the potential of keeping this one and expanding to a play facility that was maybe a little bit smaller, scaled down a little bit, but was accessible, had that accessibility feature to it? So that we're technically
Yeah.
expanding the size of the playground area to include a structure that was for youth that had accessibility issues.
Yeah, I think we were trying to do that, but so I think that was the idea with the 200,000, that it would be accessible.
Okay.
But we can bring it back and just make sure it did include that. I thought it did. But maybe when accessibility, the word may have to do with ages of people versus, the physical aspect of it. So you're talking about like someone in a wheelchair, just so that
Yeah,
I'm
I
clear?
thought that's why the accessible price tag was what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
That feature is not necessarily for older age group children.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
If you don't,
So
you guys don't mind, I
Kara-
really appreciate that. Thank you.
Kara, you're going to contact, talk to your people and get some better numbers on basketball court / hockey rink, pavilion. I'm grateful for you getting those numbers, especially if you can get them, in a short term. This is going to sound stupid, but I'd never really thought about it. Why did they point the band shell toward where they did? If we could just get a bunch of, if we could just get a bunch of people to go down there, a lot of hands make light work. We'll just
Pick it up, move it.
We'll just pick it up and turn it around, right?
If it sounds like it needs repairs, then it's not necessarily the thing to do. So let's look at that. If you guys don't mind, I'll reach out to you guys. I don't want to send people in directions and not give a helping hand for you. So I'm more than willing. If the rest of the committee doesn't see that as a conflict with me just trying to help get them. the
I
right
would
people
love to see a
connected.
design,
I'm impressed that you've got people.
Yeah, I would love to, I've been hoping that we could, instead of doing piecemeal at Volunteer Green, is look at the whole thing.
Yeah, I appreciate all of your ideas. It's wonderful. I'm definitely up for adding more things to our list.
Well, you got to admit, all this stuff has the potential to really improve the quality of life of people here in town.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we did discuss when you mentioned possibly keeping the current playground, we were hoping at some point in the near future to get some type of evaluation of the current playground. That was more aimed towards what can we do to maintain the current playground to keep it at a safe level, for children to use until we're able to replace it. But, once we get an actual inspection of some sort of the playground, then that might give us a better idea of if it would be feasible to keep the current playground.
Okay, Eric has his hand up. Eric?
Yeah, on the pavilion front, this might be worth looking into. I live in the new north end of Burlington, right by Letty Park. And in the parking lot of the ice rink is the entire like galvanized steel and wood Raptor system for a pavilion that I think was at North Beach. And it's just sitting there, and it might be something the city of Burlington has.
Wouldn't that be funny?
Oh,
Well,
gee.
hey, we love sustainability and recycle, reuse. Yeah.
So I
Okay,
just
so-
something just to give a call to Burlington Parks and Rec and ask about. It's just pavilion roof structure that's in the parking lot at Letty Ice Rink.
one of our members works for Burlington Recs and Park, so.
So you're gonna call them?
Yeah.
Mary, are you
ask.
gonna call them?
We can ask her, yeah.
Or we can get a bunch of trailers and have it out of there tonight.
Yeah.
Well, it's something that occurs to me with a lot of things on your list. A lot of things on your list look to me like they would be potentially budget items as opposed to like capital investments. Frankly, I'm a bit surprised that the Recreation Committee hasn't approached us for a line item on our budget at some point. And if the Richmond committee did that, I agree with Kara. If we have members from neighboring towns, maybe they would like to contribute too. If they want to be on the committee, I'm assuming that they feel like they use our resources and they might want to contribute to that as well. But many of your items are not like hugely expensive, like trash cans. They're not hugely expensive, and there's something that need to be done on a regular basis, not just a one-shot deal. It's not inconceivable to me that, we could consider, a few $1,000s a year as a line item budget for recreation, seeing as we do that for other similar services.
Put that on your to-do for next November.
So-
Get your budget.
I want to ask
Thing to
Eric
add
a
here,
question.
Jake, but this is Tom.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, just kind of thinking out loud here. I mean, is this a time to also kind of tuck in the idea of about community gardens? Because we did hear a little bit about community gardens.
Right. I was just going to
Voluntary.
ask that about Mary. I know Mary and many others have talked about community gardens, and allegedly there were going to be community gardens at the corner of Cochran and Thompson, but I have never been able to find the things.
I think there was
It's
this year.
behind Gary Bressor's property.
Yeah, I think
That's
there
still
are.
running though?
Oh, yeah.
It started this year.
This was its first year and
I wouldn't use the.
we gave,
recreation.
the town gave funding so that Gary Bressor's land can have a water spigot for those people to have gardening water.
They were
But
looking.
again,
to
it's
expand.
private land.
They were looking to expand as well, right? Next year.
Okay.
There's not much, if they want to expand, that's all the land back there that Gary has marked off for them.
Okay, I just threw that out there. I was going to ask Mary the same thing because I figured you would absolutely have the knowledge of what's happened over the years. We didn't see recreational gardens, community gardens as a frequent item on the suggestions list. But again, in terms of quality of life, it's
Oh,
not.
I agree with you. I had brought it up a number of times when I was on the select board and I always got shot down. Fran Thomas said, oh, we tried it once and it didn't work. Oh, okay, then only go to the moon once. Oh, that's right. That's all we did. So, yeah, I think having community gardens where I've seen Shelburne do it. I've seen, there's one on Spear Street behind a UVM building that's, and City of Burlington does it through Parks and Recreation. And they always have a waiting list for their gardens. And most of it, I think, is on town land or city land or whatever. But, the garden that I do on Safford's land, they let me use that. And I fed 6 families last year on that property. But I think it's feasible, in other places. I let people garden on my land right now. You can't see it because that's where they grow their hemp products, but I let them grow it there for free. They just have to get there to take care of it. So I do think it's feasible. I think the VYCC, it wouldn't kill them to let somebody use it, but we had actually talked to them about using the land between the new acquisition and the barn, and they said, oh, no, you're going to have to spend a lot of money for it. So, okay, you get all your taxes for free and you don't give anything back to the town. Thank you. But yeah, I think there are people, like I would let people garden on my land as a community garden. And if they wanted to make improvements, they could make them on their own.
So I think the
Right.
question that Tom brought up is, would the volunteers green be a good place for that? And
Yeah, I was just thinking
and
volunteers.
I like that idea. Would the rec committee possibly kick around the idea of a management plan of, if we found a place for a community garden to manage the plots and assign them kind of thing? Or would the recreational committee rather not do that? I think that's something that has been posed out there and I want to make sure.
Yeah.
I don't have to answer right now, but
Oh, I feel I can answer. It's a great idea, but I think we have enough to do with the 5 people that we have to just
Okay.
try to focus on these improvements for volunteers green. That's one thing that we really talked about. Let's fix, improve, enhance volunteers green
Right.
and not add on too much. It's just a lot, I totally
Right.
get what you're saying, but it's a lot.
I still
agree.
think, Tom, that you raise a good point. We should try to figure out if we could, it doesn't have to go through the rec committee, but every community garden, there's one up at Ethan Allen Homestead in the north end of Burlington. There's one on, oh shoot, I used to live there, West Street in Essex Junction. That it's not very big, but it is always crowded. I would
maybe
love
a
to.
recommendation for the select board to possibly put together a committee of volunteers who want to volunteer to be on a community garden committee to start looking at that and leave the recreational committee doing trying to manage the
Right.
couple parks that they have.
Yeah, I think that's the obvious next step. So when Josh and June are talking about next select board meetings agenda, it might not be a bad idea just to throw that on there as a 5-minute topic, because it keeps coming up. Since I've lived here, and it just keeps coming up, and then we never do anything.
Form a committee.
to form a committee, and then they could possibly work with some landowners in the area that would welcome that. So I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad everybody brought it up, but I don't think it needs to go on the recreational committee's
And you could
plate.
talk
No,
with-
I totally agree. I totally agree. The question was, had they ever talked about it? Not so much. Right. The question is really, had the Recreation Committee ever considered it? Not, can we dump another thing on them? I think that, you know, we want to make them glad to volunteer and not go, oh my God, I'm going to run away.
Kate
Okay.
Sherry, if you guys don't mind, if it's okay with you, if Josh gives me your contact information, is that okay?
That sounds
thanks.
great.
Sure, sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Sure. Well, obviously, I think you can see that we're very interested in what you guys do.
Yeah, and actually, we're very excited to hear about getting on the regular town budget and or capital plan. So that's great.
Right.
Please understand that I am not speaking for the select board.
Yeah.
I'm speaking as
No, but, you know,
a private
Wink,
individual.
nudge, nudge.
Speaking as a member of the select board, I can't, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, well, we talked about that, but they said it couldn't be done, I'd be a wealthy man. And I'm not wanting to spend the taxpayers' money willy-nilly, but I'm tired of having people say this relatively obvious and expensive thing. Oh, we just can't do it. Mary's right. We've been told too many times that we just can't do that. And I just don't buy that.
But I think when you start looking at budgets and planning, it's if there's going to be committee members from other towns, is what the other towns can bring to the table as well, and what they get for a benefit. So have a well-rounded plan when you do it next October.
Right. I don't want to just say, here's a shovel, here's some money, go dig. There should be a plan, but I would like to do whatever we can to get that plan going.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you all. We'll follow up and hopefully have additional information for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very
Cool.
much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so I think this has been a pretty good discussion tonight. There's a lot of possibilities. You know, the Recreation Committee had some things that they had been working on that match our list, and those do not look very expensive. You know, Jeff has made the point that some of these things might not be as obvious ARPA money as just town budget money, but we do need to spend the money on something. And I like the idea of town beautification and doing things to make, you know, our most prized shared resource. At least I would think Volunteers Green would be pretty high up on that list to arrest the decay. And, you know, in the year 2023, we're in the 21st century, we should have flying cars and cities on the moon. Well, maybe we don't have those, but at least we can have a well kept up Volunteers Green.
Good.
And Mary, again, I really value your knowledge about gardening and the institutional history of attempts like that in the town. So if we can get a committee together to review and discuss community gardens, I hope you would consider being on it.
Done.
Okay. Okay, looking at the rest of the agenda, we have two other points. Review the criteria for evaluating feedback of ARPA fund usage. And then the final bullet point is to go back to the spreadsheet and keep talking about it. It's 8:17 at night, and I could go either way. Maybe we could put it this way, and I'm open to suggestions. I don't want to declare by editorial fiat that this is how we do things, but we are hearing, you know, a lot of ideas tossed around. How do we evaluate them? And expense, well, I mean, I could actually we've already got kind of a list of this, but I just want to kind of share, get your thoughts, because we can just quickly summarize this, and then this could be the main topic of the next meeting, the one that Jeff is going to share.
Great, thanks.
And I won't be there to say no. But
Don't worry, Jay, I'll
criteria.
figure it all out before you get back.
That's
You'll
good.
have to decide it.
If I come back, right? If I come back.
Oh, yeah, stay at Buffalo. Oh, no, Vegas. Sorry, I got it mixed up.
Vegas. No, you could not pay me to live in Vegas. I don't care. Sorry, I don't like Vegas because I hate seeing people gamble away their kids' college money. It's just, I'm very conservative in that respect. So criteria that we've talked about, we heard the same one, ongoing expense. Okay, That has to be taken into account, and we can't just take it for granted because, as Jeff said, even something as simple as buying benches, there's ongoing expenses with maintaining those. What is its overall purpose? Is it just to spend money, or is it in pursuit of an ARPA goal? Health, well-being, economic opportunity, etc. Now, I know there've been other criteria stated. What are some of the other criteria that we would want to use when we're doing, a further pass at eliminating things and going on to report things to the select board?
We've talked about leveraging money.
Leveraging money, absolutely.
Sorry, grants.
Yes, that has got to be a very key point. That's been said by numerous people tonight. Kara said it several times. If we have two possible uses for the money, and one lets us leverage money, and one is just, it's out of our pockets and it's gone, no matter how worthwhile it might be, we should pick the one that lets us get grant matching. Do you all agree with that? That's got to be a key constraint.
I don't know. I think it's going to come down to what other criteria it meets for me. I don't necessarily want to throw money at something just because there's grant money for it.
Oh, but
It's
that
not
would be
priority.
a tiebreaker, I would think, between two topics. If they're all
It's a
otherwise
tie
equal.
race. If it's a tie race, if that's what you mean, then okay.
Yeah.
Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm inexpertly trying to say.
We could weight them,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, other criteria, anything, I've heard so many different criteria.
I would want the full ARPA listed out, health, well-being, economic. I would want to see them all listed so we don't repeat them again on another criteria next time, but all the
Okay.
goals.
Well, are these are not goals that are dictated by the feds on how we spend the ARPA money. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I was wondering.
They're broad categories that they make suggestions in, including one that we haven't mentioned here, which is internet broadband availability.
Right. Then, another one might be infrastructure or, I guess what would, capital, something that would fit on a capital plan. Is it the way that I interpret that, so like trash cans don't fit on a capital plan, but the band shell does, that kind of thing.
Really big trash can would.
One that lasts 20 years.
Well, if we've
But
got a really
not-
big trash can, everybody would just start throwing all their household trash into it.
Here's my thought process with that. And that's why I'm saying, for me, it comes down what's in front of me and let me look at what I'm going to pick for choices.
Mhm.
Is because beautification could do a major impact on our community
Mhm.
that doesn't cost a lot of money, but we've chosen not to do it as select board members because you control the budget for many, many years,
Mhm.
along with not keeping up the band shell. There's certain things that haven't been done by choice that now, since this is a one-time influx of money, we might be able to do some things that have been set aside and not done year after year after year after year because of lack of whatever reason, funds, opportunity, desire.
Or just people feeling sheepish about something. One thing that I've heard people say, we've talked about putting signs up at the various entrances to town, so not just one on East and West Main, but on Heinsberg Road, on Hines Road. People feel kind of sheepish saying we should have, people sometimes feel kind of sheepish saying we need a bunch of really attractive signs around town because they're just vanity projects, but I think that they'd be worth doing. And I don't think they'd cost that much. So I think Kara's got a good point. Beautification should not be something that we just say, oh, as long as it works, it's good. It doesn't need to look nice.
I think it's a matter of pride and if vanity is in that pride, to be proud of your town and want to have something that represents it, I think that's fantastic and
Right.
well needed.
Well, I think it goes
I
to health.
totally agree.
It goes to all three of the ARPA things: health, well-being, and economic opportunity. If people are feeling welcome, they're feeling included,
So
all of those pieces of the puzzle. So in my head, I just want to go to why I say I'm not 100% for number 4 in that sense. In my head, I see us making a recommendation to spend this amount of money on this criteria, this specific criteria, and maybe a little bit of this amount of money on that meets some of the other criteria, like the beautification thing.
So beautification is a measure, not a criteria. You know, if we wanted to invest in, bathrooms at the Volunteers Green, that's not necessarily beautification, it's not, it's not. It's more of a measure. If you want to do signs, that would be a topic and something that we apply a criteria to.
I'm just saying that that was a broad category that we started discussing, not a criteria. It was a broad category that we just started discussing.
We're discussing criteria right now,
So
though, right?
that's why I brought that category up, because if it's long lasting, something part of a capital plan, I don't know if a sign is part of a capital plan or if it's part of a maintenance plan.
So these can be exclusive, they can be mutually exclusive.
Okay,
I'm not saying that any one project needs to hit all of these different things.
oh, okay. Well,
Right.
that's good to know. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to get this list. We've talked about this off and on so many times. And this is because, as Jeff said, we would like to get this pretty far along by town meeting, and that's coming up very shortly. We have to really solidify our thoughts on this. And like I said, when I'm in Las Vegas, in the heat, this could be something that the next meeting could really focus on, a scoring system. These are all things to take into account. And I frankly think beautification is a criterion, because if you have two projects, one contributes to making the town more attractive and increasing community pride, and the other doesn't, but they're otherwise equal, I would tend to pick the one that makes the town look better.
So could I add one more, or?
Sure, please do.
There's potentially under lasting, it depends how far you want to stretch the definition, but the one criteria that keeps, popping up in my mind is to use the ARPA funds for, more or less a major down payment that pays dividends over the long term. So in other words, it's a big capital investment in a project that reduces the town's expenses over the life of that project. And we can come up with lots of different examples of that.
The sidewalks? Is that what you mean? Something like
Um,
that?
Might be,
Well, that.
The town center, like? you
Yeah,
mean
the
a
town
capital-
the town center,
Energy
the town
efficiency and the town
efficiency, something like that, that would, dramatically or substantially reduce the town's expenses as a result of a major upgrade in the town's infrastructure.
I think that would go capital plan. I agree with you.
Yeah,
I-
so
I
to me,
think-
that's kind of falls under lasting, but I guess it kind of depends if you want to.
Can we just remove lasting and put like capital plan as number 6 and how he
Well,
said that?
Yeah, capital plan in terms of
Dash.
paying long-term
Right,
dividends.
right. Capital plan dash what you've just said in 6.
and project, that has long-term dividends.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily
Well,
long-term dividends.
Dividends
No,
could be
that's
the
like
form,
paying out, yeah,
yeah, dividends can be the form of lower expenses.
Yeah,
which is- that's
dividends
the
slash
expense.
lower expenses. Because people won't always know what you mean by the lower.
Talking
expense.
my language.
Okay,
Something that Bard, we should probably wrap this discussion up. It's almost 8:30, but something that
Right.
Bard has suggested was if we come up with a project that does have ongoing expenses, how those expenses would be paid for should be identified.
So that's going up to number 1.
Yeah, so,
Number 1 and how paid for.
and how paid for,
Expenses dash how we pay for it in the future.
so, I don't know exactly how that fits, but, it's something he's mentioned.
Wouldn't most of that though be under maintenance, Jeff, and that
would.
as an ongoing expense? I, not like you have to rebuild it every year, but just like if the, and
Yep.
if the band shell had been better maintained, it would be in better shape today.
Yeah, so it could be, that any one project, that could be the answer, is that the town needs to maintain it
And
going
here's an
forward.
Estimate for the year.
right.
Or it could be, that, the recreation, Bolton has to pay for it, I don't know.
Okay, so
I like
these are all
that.
good ideas to be thinking about, everybody. But this is, I'm going to email this very rough. I even called the document very rough list. I'm going to email this to all of you, and don't discuss it among each other in mail, but each person can take their own stab at how would you draft this, and then bring that to the next meeting and try to come up with one really solid master list, phrased however you like. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes,
Yes.
but can I ask a question real quick? Where would your volunteers green, I just asking you guys opinion wise, where would volunteers green? I know you're gonna weight the criteria, that kind of thing, but would it meet any of these criteria?
Number 5, sure. Health and well-being, but beautification,
Yeah.
this ongoing maintenance cost might be, perhaps there should be a budget for the recreation committee to maintain whatever.
Okay,
You know,
cool. I just
Okay.
wanted
like
to.
So
to-
these
I
are
like
all,
it.
these are all good things to talk about, but it is 8:29. And I don't ever like to run over. I'm very paranoid about that. But these are all great things to talk about. And next meeting is really the prime place to talk about it. And then we can.
Is that the agenda item? So I want to try to understand are there any other agenda items that we need to discuss at our next meeting?
We can continue reviewing suggestions. And we could even begin sort of thinking, when we look at the list of suggestions that don't fall under transportation, don't fall under rec, there is other stuff out there. And some of that is beautification. You could be looking at the beautification suggestions and saying, well, let's look at these. Does this reduce the town ongoing expense? Is it just pride in the community? So you could even start applying these to the things on the list, and keep notes.
And we might want to think about weighting, weighting criteria
Sure.
would.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Different kind of waiting.
No, I totally agree. And so that's my challenge. Right, that's my challenge to you for next meeting. So can everybody agree that should probably be the focus of the next meeting? Okay. So at this point,
Move to.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, all in favor, state your name, or rather state your name and your vote.
Mary, aye.
Jeff, I.
Here,
Josh, aye.
J.I. Okay, thank you so much. I will see you, I guess, in a month. Jeff, thank you so much for herding this group of cats next week, next meeting.